Hey everyone, get ready to dive into one of those big, juicy questions. You know the ones, right? The ones humans have been wrestling with for ages. Do we really have free will? Or is everything we do already decided? Like a movie we haven't seen yet, just waiting to play out. We're taking a deep dive into this with a little help from Professor Scott Aaronson, specifically his lecture on free will. He's got this really engaging style, playful, but makes you think, Buckle up because we're taking a detour through physics, philosophy, even computer science. Trust me, it'll make sense once we get there. Let's start with a misconception. A lot of people have it about free will. It's this idea that if it's not real, then none of us are responsible for our actions. It's like saying, my brain made me do it, right? But there's a problem with that logic, and Professor Aaronson uses this fascinating case from history to show why. The Leopold and Loeb trial.
Right, from 1926. You see, this case really digs into the implications of a deterministic worldview on our justice system.
Okay, so for those who haven't heard of it, picture two crazy smart students. At the University of Chicago, we're talking future lawyers, brilliant minds, but they're obsessed with this idea of being what they called Nietzschean supermen. Basically, they thought they were above the rules, above morality as everyone else understands it,
And this belief played out in a very real and, sadly, very tragic way. They decided the only way to prove their supposed superiority was to commit the perfect murder.
Yeah, and it gets really chilling here because their victim was just a 14-year-old boy. They kidnapped him just to make some philosophical point, proving how above it all they were. Except, surprise, they got caught. One of them left his glasses at the crime scene. Not so super after all, I guess. But here's where it gets really interesting. Their lawyer, the famous Clarence Darrow, actually used the lack of free will in their defense. He was like, look, these kids were practically programmed to do this. No, their actions were predetermined, so how can you blame them?
And this is where we bump up against a pretty big logical inconsistency. Because if their actions were predetermined by forces outside their control, then so were the judge's actions, the jury's actions, everyone in the courtroom. It can't just apply when it's convenient, right?
Right. It's like saying, okay, so the laws of physics made them commit this horrible crime. But those same laws also predetermine that I have to find them guilty and throw the book at them. Where does personal responsibility even fit into that equation?
Exactly. The legal system, at its core, relies on this idea that we have the ability to choose our actions, and therefore, we're accountable for the choices we make. It's the foundation for concepts like guilt, punishment, even rehabilitation. Now, whether free will is an illusion or not, well, that's a whole other discussion. But it's fascinating to see how this debate plays out in the real world.
Okay, so we've busted that myth. But there's another misconception Aaronson tackles. And this is where it gets kind of geeky, but in a good way. A lot of folks think that if our actions aren't predetermined, it means they're just random, like flipping a coin. And that's where computer science comes in.
Right, because even computers, which aren't exactly known for their free will, can still operate with a degree of what we call non-determinism. It's not always a simple A leads to B scenario.
Right. It's important to get this distinction clear. When we say random,
Right.
we usually mean something that's unpredictable, like the spin of a roulette wheel, right? But non-determinism, that's different. Think of it like, imagine you're trying to find the absolute shortest route between a bunch of different cities. It gets pretty complicated, right?
Exactly. And there are algorithms designed to solve this kind of problem. But even they aren't just, randomly spitting out routes. They're exploring multiple possibilities, different pathways, to find the most efficient one. It's not predetermined, but it's not pure chance either. There's a method to the madness.
It's like there's a logic behind it, even if we don't know exactly what path it's going to choose beforehand.
And this idea, this space of multiple possibilities, well, that's something Professor Aaronson thinks is super relevant to how we think about free will. It's not just about being predictable or completely random. It's about navigating the space between those two extremes, which is something we'll dive into even further with our next mind-bending thought experiment.
All right, so we've cleared up a few things about free will.
Yeah.
But now comes the really fun part, the thought experiments. And this next one, it's a classic, but it always messes with my head.
It's a good one. It's called Newcomb's paradox?
Yeah, Newcomb's paradox.
Okay.
Okay, so picture this. You're face-to-face with this, well, the super predictor, someone or something that has this uncanny ability to predict people's choices. And I'm not talking about just having good intuition. I'm talking never wrong, always spot on.
And that's a key point, actually, because it sets up the entire thought experiment, right? It forces us to think beyond the limitations of our everyday experiences.
Right. So this predictor, they lay out two boxes in front of you. Box number one, nice and simple. It's got a guaranteed $1,000 inside. Sweet, right. But box number two, well, that's where things get interesting.
It introduces this element of risk, and more importantly, it plays with our understanding of how free will might actually operate in these scenarios.
Exactly. See, box number two, it either has a cool $1,000,000 inside, that's $1,000,000, or it's completely empty. And here's the kicker, the predictor. They've already made their prediction about which box you'll choose. If they predicted you'd go for both boxes, they left box two empty. But if they predicted you'd only take box number two, they filled it with $1,000,000. So what do you do? I mean, it seems like the obvious choice is to take both boxes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the intuitive response, right? The one that's driven by pure logic. You're guaranteed at least $1,000, and you might get lucky with the $1,000,000.
Right, because even if you're wrong, you still get something.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. The predictor has never been wrong before. Every single person who went for the greedy option, taking both boxes, they ended up with just the $1,000. And everyone who trusted the predictor and just took box number two walked away a millionaire.
It really makes you wonder, are we really making a free choice here? Or are we just playing out a script that's already been written, so to speak?
Man, this whole thing makes my head spin. For a while there, I was stuck in this loop, going back and forth. Take both boxes. But the predictor's never wrong. But what if this time's different? It's enough to drive you nuts.
Yeah, no, it's a brain bender for sure. And that's exactly why this paradox is so powerful. It exposes the limits of our intuition when we start to really dig into the nature of free will.
Okay, so how do we even begin to untangle this? I mean, is there a right answer?
Well, not exactly. But Professor Aaronson, he offered a possible solution. A way of thinking about it that honestly blew my mind. He calls it you-completeness.
You-completeness. Okay, I'm listening.
So essentially what Professor Aaronson proposes is that in order for this super predictor to be 100% accurate, they would need to create a perfect simulation of you.
Okay, so like a copy.
Exactly. A copy so precise that it would think exactly like you, make all the same choices, even down to the smallest details.
And if that's the case, if this perfect simulation exists, what does it say about the choices being made? Are they truly free? Or just a reflection of the original you?
That's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? It pushes us to consider whether true free will is even possible in a system where perfect prediction, even theoretical, might actually exist.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is.
Okay, so we've got these super predictors, simulated consciousnesses, I mean. It's a lot. But here's the thing. This isn't just some abstract philosophical debate, right?
Yeah.
It all ties back to how our brains work, how we make choices in the real world. So we've been talking about these mind-bending concepts, but what about the physical stuff, like our brains? How does that factor into all of this free will stuff?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. You see, there's this whole other layer to this discussion. When we consider that our brains are essentially physical organs, governed by the laws of physics and chemistry.
Right, of course. So if our brains are just like complicated machines made of meat, then maybe free will is just an illusion. Created by all those neurons firing, right?
It's a question that neuroscientists have been grappling with for years. And there have actually been some fascinating experiments done where scientists were able to predict certain decisions a person would make a fraction of a second before they were even consciously aware of making them.
Whoa, seriously? How is that even possible?
Well, by monitoring brain activity in real time, they can see these patterns forming that correspond to specific actions. Before the person even consciously registers making a choice, it's like our brains are making some calls without consulting the conscious part of ourselves first.
Okay, that's both super cool and a little creepy. So maybe your brains are doing some behind-the-scenes work. But what about this idea of consciousness being tied to our physical selves?
Yeah.
Like if we could somehow, perfectly copy our brains, would that copy also have our consciousness, our free will, our unique quirks?
Now that's a question that takes us straight into the realm of science fiction, but with some very real philosophical implications. And Professor Aaronson uses this really wild thought experiment about teleportation to explore this idea.
Okay, hit me with it.
All right, so imagine a machine that can scan your entire body, every single atom, and then transmit that information to, say, Mars at the speed of light. On Mars, another machine receives that information and uses it to reconstruct you. A perfect copy, atom for atom.
So like a Star Trek transport.
Yeah.
But with more existential dread.
Exactly. But the question is the you on Mars truly you? Or is it just a copy? with all your memories and experiences, but not truly you.
Right, because if it's just information being transmitted, then what makes the original you so special? And here's another brain twister. What if the original you gets, like, vaporized the instant the copy on Mars is complete? Would you even step into that machine?
It's quite the dilemma, isn't it? Because on the one hand, if consciousness is just information, well, it shouldn't matter where that information is stored, right? But something about it just feels intuitively wrong.
Yeah, I get that. It's like, would both yous even want to exist at the same time?
Yeah.
I can just imagine two identical versions of me standing there, arguing about who gets to keep the Netflix password.
It's a funny image, but it really gets to the heart of this idea of personal identity. What does it even mean to be you? Is there something unique and irreplaceable about our individual consciousness? Or are we, in a way, just patterns of information that could theoretically be replicated?
Okay, so we've got brains making subconscious decisions, teleported copies arguing over streaming services. How does it all connect? Is there any way to make sense of free will in all of this?
Well, that's where Professor Aaronson brings in another mind-blowing concept: relativity,
Einstein's theory of relativity.
the one and only. And it tells us that time is not absolute, it's relative. What that means is your present moment might be someone else's future, depending on how fast they're moving relative to you.
Hold on, are we talking about time travel here?
Not exactly time travel, but it's almost as strange. Imagine someone traveling at an incredibly high speed, close to the speed of light. From their perspective, they might perceive events unfolding on Earth out of order, like they're watching a movie on fast forward.
So they might see the outcome of our choices
Yeah,
before we even make them.
in a sense, yes. But here's the crucial point. It doesn't actually negate free will. Just because someone from their frame of reference might perceive your future actions as already set in stone, it doesn't mean you didn't freely choose them in your own experience of time.
Okay, my brain needs a break after that one. But before we get totally lost in the space-time continuum, there's one more thing we have to talk about: the free will theorem. And it's just as wild as it sounds.
It really is. This theorem comes from the world of quantum mechanics, and it essentially links the idea of free will to the fundamental nature of reality itself.
Okay, break that down for me. How does quantum physics connect to free will?
In the most basic sense, quantum mechanics tells us that at the subatomic level, the universe is inherently unpredictable. We can't know with absolute certainty the outcome of certain quantum events until they actually happen.
Okay, so where does free will fit into all of that?
Well, the free will theorem takes this a step further. It essentially says that if we, as observers, have the free will to choose how we measure these unpredictable quantum events, then the universe itself must be making up the results on the fly, so to speak.
Whoa, so you're saying that even the universe might not know what's going to happen until it happens.
That's the mind-blowing implication of the free will theorem. It challenges this whole idea of a pre-programmed universe and suggests that even at the most fundamental level, there's an element of genuine possibility, of openness to reality.
So where does that leave us? I feel like we've gone down a million different rabbit holes in this episode.
We have, haven't we? We've gone from courtroom dramas to super predictors, from teleported brains to the unpredictable nature of the quantum world. But if there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's that the question of free will is far more complex and far more nuanced than we often think it is.
It's not just a simple yes or no answer, is it? It touches on everything, from neuroscience to philosophy to the very fabric of reality itself.
Exactly. And while we might not have all the answers, exploring these questions, these thought experiments, can help us to appreciate the mystery and wonder of our own existence just a little bit more.
I like that, appreciating the mystery a bit more. And on that note, we're going to leave you to ponder all of this. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into free will. We'll see you next time, when we'll be tackling another mind-bending topic that just might have you questioning everything you thought you knew.